Welcome to the eLABorate Topics podcast, where we focus on lab-specific strategies for medical laboratory professionals. We're proud to be the healthcare detectives that work behind the scenes to get the results needed to influence medical decisions. Let's grow together and jump right into the lab.
Welcome to eLABorate Topics. I am your host, Lona Small, Stephanie Whitehead, and Tywauna Wilson. And eLABorate Topics is a weekly podcast where we come to you to give you topics and tools to help you to excel both inside and outside the lab. And today I'm excited about our topic. We're talking about creating the work environment for better staff retention. And just to define a little bit about employee retention, it's really a strategy or a plan to reduce employee turnover. And it's usually a responsibility by the organization to keep talented employees. So usually it's best to foster a positive work environment and promote engagement. And although engagement is not the main reason for retention, that's a big factor. And so according to Gallup, 85% of employees are not engaged, or they're actively disengaged. So that's really a big group of people that's not engaged. And so there are different methods, different strategies that can be used to engage our staff or to retain our staff. And in terms of responsibility, Gallup thinks that 70% of any kind of variance when it comes to engagement is the responsibility of the manager. And there's a lot that's actually on the manager's shoulder. But based on some of the questions that are asked from the employees, 70% of these factors lie with the manager. The manager has a big responsibility, but there are so many other factors. There are some questions that when it comes to engagement, I have a friend at work, or I have materials to do my job. So having a friend at work is very important. So there's some responsibility that leaks down to the team. So being able to support other team members, being able to create that environment of either safety, being supportive is so important. And what we're seeing is that the way we used to do things in order to keep staff is totally different. Nowadays, a lot of staff, they're actually looking for development, personal development. So as a manager, it's going to be so important to be equipped with tools to help to coach, to help to grow your staff. So a lot of the job satisfaction has to do with that. So people are saying that they want purpose and they want meaning, and they want to be known for what makes them unique. So it's so important for managers to be aware of things like those, how they're building relationships with their team, how the team as a whole, they're working together. And so these are some of the things that we need to consider. Who are responsible for these retention? Who's responsible for staff engagement? And when I look at it, it's really mostly the manager, it's partly the team members, and the organization structure that is set up based on your mission and your vision. So when you're thinking of retention, think about that. Think about the team that you have. Who are the people that you have hired on your team? What's the culture that you have? And think of it in a holistic way when you're thinking of engaging your staff. So Tywauna and Stephanie, what do you think in terms of staff engagement? I know, Tywauna, you talk about why is it really, really important, especially now for the lab. You can talk about that, but is there anything that, in terms of who is responsible, that you'd want to piggyback on based on that?
I agree with what you said, Lona. Everybody's responsible for staff engagement. I know a lot of times we want to put it on one person, especially when we have those engagement surveys that seem to be the responsibility of the manager of following up on metrics and things like that. But really, the engagement of the staff is really a team effort. Everybody needs to participate in that, and making it an environment where people want to come to work. You spend the majority of your time at work, away from your family. When I think about, my day and commute and the time that I spend more time at work than at home. At least it seems that way with my husband and daughter. And so you want to come to an environment where you definitely want to be engaged, where you want to be happy, and where it's going to be an environment that's inclusive. Stephanie, you have anything that came to mind as Lona was talking?
Absolutely. I think I agree with you both. Although many studies, like Lona said, will show you that the direct manager or the direct supervisor overseeing an employee's performance has the greatest impact on their engagement. And many times when a phlebotomist or a technologist leaves your organization and goes to another organization for the exact same position, oftentimes they're not leaving the job. They're not leaving your organization, they're leaving their boss. And so, again, we want to do all that we can in management to ensure that we're creating and fostering and developing an environment where everybody can be successful and do the things that they need to do. However, we also want to make sure that as individuals we're taking ownership of our energy, we're taking ownership of our words, and that we are being responsible for the output and the culture that we are contributing to in the laboratory environment.
Absolutely. And then when I think about this in regards to retaining our staff, and it is vital, especially in today's laboratories. As we all know now more than ever, we are definitely seeing that shortage. We're seeing an increase in staff retirements without the prepared talent to move up into some of the positions that our former laboratorians held. And so we're seeing that where we are having that, where we need to do a better job with our retaining our staff, just because the people who have been around, who have had that historical knowledge of the organization, are now decided that it's time for them to move on to their next chapter in life. Again, talking about the staffing shortages and finding qualified and prepared talent to move into all roles of the laboratory. So whether it's our front-end teams, our phlebotomy, our processing, whether it's our technical assistants or our technical staff, our techs, we are finding it very difficult to be able to retain talent. Let's face it, if you are a tech today, you have options. And it might not have been that case, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, but now you have options. If Lab A is not meeting your needs, then Lab B probably has an opening, or Lab C that's 15 minutes away may have an opening as well. So it's very important that we're able to retain our staff. And why wouldn't we? Think about it. You spend all of that time training, depending on your organization. The training plan could be anywhere from 8 weeks to 12 weeks to 16 weeks, some places 3 to 6 months. And you spend that time training and then making sure the staff is competent, only to have them walk out of the door. And so that's energy that your staff is putting into that hire, and we want to make sure that we're able to keep them, because it does bring the morale down when you spend all of that time and effort pouring into a new team member only to see them walk out of the door. And then we're finding a limited skill set, as Lona mentioned earlier, especially in some of our advanced leadership roles. So if we think about our lead technologist roles, we think about our supervisors, managers, our directors. Unfortunately, healthcare has not always done a great job, and especially in the lab, of succession planning. So we may not have a prepared person ready to assume those roles. So what happens, you've been here, you've been committed, you've been dedicated, you've been a great tech, and so we are going to promote you up. And here it is, you move into a role that you were not prepared for. You don't feel confident or competent in. And so you got into that role, and now, because of your abilities, there could be some retaining issues with your team. And so now more than ever, it's critical for us as laboratorians, as leadership, as team members, to all contribute to being able to keep our teammates. Because, again, we know if we're short, what happens, that workload comes back on everybody. And at the end of the day, we are there for our patients, and we do what we need to do to make sure we are providing quality patient care and being able to give those lab results so that our colleagues, our physician colleagues, our nurses, so that they are able to take care of our patients with certainty based off of our data. And so that's why I think it's so, so critical now more than ever to retain staff, to talk about the industry, to get people into our environments and keep them and let them know that what we do is important and that this is a good field to be in. It is a good career. Our labs are great. Stephanie, you have anything to add or any thoughts? And Lona, what do you think about, why it's so vital, especially today, to be able to keep our team?
When I think about right now with the limited number of skilled medical lab professionals that we have, and based on what I'm hearing, some of the training programs are closing, and many times for growth, people are looking to develop themselves. So if there's no opportunity for them to move to the next level where they feel as if there's chance to stay, they're looking at other professions. So it's so important, because of our limited number of skilled professionals, to find ways to keep the ones we have. Find opportunity for growth, find opportunity for, instead of going outside, to maybe look for consultants who are probably not medical lab professionals who don't understand the job, to develop the ones that we have and keep them within, so that we don't lose what we already have, limited numbers. And we're talking about retention, but there's a whole nother episode that we could talk about in terms of just getting new professionals. But based on where we are now, it's really vital to keep the ones we have and make sure we're developing them.
Well, this podcast, we talk about helping our listeners excel inside and outside of the laboratory. And so I think we've done all a great job of helping the listeners understand why it is so vitally important that we retain the staff that we have in our laboratories, whether it just be so we can get to a point where we're not continuously in orientation and training mode and people are working short and working overtime to try to fill in shifts, or if it's because we're working in a specialized field like cytology or HLA, where it's really hard to come across those skills, and we really want to make sure that we maintain those individuals in our laboratory so we can continue to perform to the level that our patients and our clinicians need us to perform at. But at this point, let's get into some actionable items, some things that the listeners can walk away from and write down and take notes and, try to implement these in your environment. Now, this is a topic where we could talk, longer than we have in this podcast. And so make sure that you go out and find any other resources that you can to help you and your teams be successful in this area. But we're just going to give you a few tips that we know from our years in the laboratory profession and in management and working alongside different types of teams and things that have worked for us. So the first tip I have on ways that we can encourage better retention and better engagement in our departments, and this really is targeted to if you're in management or if you're an informal leader in your laboratory, but anyone can take some of these tips and work with your teams to implement them. And so the first one is ensure that your onboarding process helps ensure that the employees understand the organization that they're working for and the laboratory that they're working in. Somebody's first, 15, 30 days, 60 days into an organization, they're really still trying to make the decision, was this a good decision? Was this a good leap? And I'm sure if you're listening and you can think about your first day on a job, you are excited. You've spent so many weeks preparing to go to this new job. You go to orientation. You are geared up to learn. And so we want the organization, your team, to be just as excited for that new employee as they are to join your team. So when they come on, in your orientation packet or somewhere during that training period, remind them why it was a good decision to join your laboratory team. Think about the things about your laboratory that are unique or special and incorporate those things into your orientation packet. I know for my laboratory, we work at an academic teaching hospital, and so I incorporate that verbiage into our orientation about the benefit of working alongside fellows and residents and attendings, about the really rich learning environment that we have here that you may not get at another private laboratory. The pathologists are always engaging and teaching and learning and helping you understand the background and the methodology behind different tests. And so you really get a lot of experience here that will be way more depth than you might get, like I said, in other laboratories, and really great experience working in an academic environment. So in your laboratory, does your organization have really great benefits? Like I said, in my organization, I tend to talk up, our health care for those who may have kids, and that's really important. But we have a lot of other benefits. Do you get discounts at a gym or at a phone company? Make sure that employees understand why it was a great decision to join your laboratory, to join your hospital. And then as you're talking about that, talk about what exactly it is about their particular position that helps fulfill the overall company's mission or goal. And by that is, take some time, like I said, in that orientation and training process to really explain to the employee how their achievements will help the overall goal. Everybody wants to know how they fit into the bigger plan, how they fit into the bigger picture. So if you're a phlebotomist, when you have great patient satisfaction scores, how does that help drive the overall company's, bottom line? If I'm a technologist, how do my great turnaround times help, our chest pain accreditation or our stroke accreditation? When I'm turning out my troponins within 40 minutes or less, how does that help the company's overall goal? And so people have a feel of how they fit into the bigger picture, and they're not just push and verify on a computer and just verifying results. Like we said before, that direct supervisor, or if you are just a person who's been in the laboratory a long time, like Lona said, people like to have friends at work. You spend so much time at work. So make sure that we're establishing a connection with those employees as they onboard. And, the employee is most influenced by the people that they're working around and the people that they work for. And so make sure you try to establish connection with the person. If you see them, going to lunch, maybe sitting by themselves, they're the new kid on the block, for, lack of a better word. So, maybe sit with them, or, maybe, give them a tour if they're looking a little bit lost. Just pay attention and be prepared when they come on board. So many times, we've had new people and laboratories can get so busy that you're just not prepared. You don't have all of their logins. You don't know where their locker is going to be. You don't really have their packet ready. You don't know who's going to train them that day. You just sit them in a computer or in a conference room and say, read these procedures. But like I said, this employee has been preparing to start in your organization, in your laboratory for a while. They were probably nervous, and really wanting to be on time for that first day so they can make a great impression. So, you guys as a team try to make a great impression on that employee also. The next point I have is make sure that your employees know what is expected of them. And so often, when we don't know what's expected of us as an employee and we have unclear expectations, that just creates confusion. It creates miscommunication. Is that your job or is that my job? And it just creates unnecessary stress. So, like I said, a lot of times people don't leave their job because they go right up the street to another hospital, A, B, or C, like Tywauna said, for the same position. So they're leaving their manager. So it's our job to make sure that when employees come on, the expectation for them is clear. Their job role is clear. You're working day shift. You're starting in the chemistry section on, the automation machine. You're responsible for Centaur maintenance. The job role, the job expectation for this employee is clear. Make sure that you're working with your human resources department to make sure their earnings is clear. We want to make sure they know exactly, if they're supposed to get a shift diff, if they're supposed to get on-call pay, overtime pay, how to get those dollars and cents that they feel like might be owed to them. If there are policies and procedures or a handbook, that all of that is spelled out and they have gotten a copy of that, maybe even signed it, and you've gotten a copy of their signature so you can acknowledge that they understand their pay. Is there an expectation to work weekends? Is there an expectation to work every other weekend or rotate? Make sure that they understand their job role and their expectation to the team. And if there is a change in that expectation, so say you have a project going on, we've had conversations before on these roundtables about inspections, readiness, LIS go lives, and so if there's an expectation to a change in schedule or an expectation of working off shifts or coming on weekends or off hours or eliminating PTO for this time frame so we can all work hands on deck to get this project done. Make sure that those things are clarified for those employees. I would say also make sure that there's a platform in your department or in your section for employees to speak their mind and to give feedback on things that need to be improved or processes that they feel like need to be improved. We just want to make sure that employees feel like we are soliciting their ideas and that we're also providing feedback. Now, this isn't a funnel for people to come and complain, but honestly, if you're working the bench and you really feel like your day, your job role could be easier if X, Y, and Z were to happen, if the staplers were moved from this point to that point, or if there were simply a phone at this workstation, or if you moved the workstation 2 steps down, it would, really improve our workflow processes. We want the employees to have a way to funnel that feedback so we can continuously be improving the things that would make their workday better and impact their workday. We just had a roundtable previously talking about diversity, so making sure that as management and even as tenured technologists in the laboratory that we're allowing everybody to use their talents and skills in our department. We want to make sure that everybody has the tools that we need to give them to succeed. And so our people being able to, if they're really tech savvy, work on, LIS builds or different reports or, making things electronic that are on paper, or if people are really skilled at creating great environments and throwing parties, maybe put that person over the celebration of the anniversaries or the celebration of when a technologist gets their certification. Just make sure that you are understanding other people's skills and talents and that they're able to foster that when they're able to come to work every single day. A couple of things that I've done in my own particular laboratory, because so many things are on perception, is make sure that you are always fostering the perception of fair and equitable treatment with your employees and investing in their well-being. And so even during COVID times where people have so many things going on personally at home as well as professionally at work, making sure that you're just providing ways to show that you're invested in people's well-being, whether that be, having somebody maybe come to your huddles and talk about retirement planning or financial wellness or things that are non-laboratory specific and non-technical that just have their mind thinking about other things. Or I'll tell you another situation we have in our cytology department. We talk about really skilled employees that we need to retain. We hired a new cytotechnologist, and he's extremely tall, just extremely tall, well over 6'5". And so sitting at a typical desk looking through a microscope was very uncomfortable for this employee. And so we implemented an ergonomic assessment to see, how could we get a desk or a lift that would raise up and down so he would be comfortable in his workstation. Imagine if we just expected him to work here for years and years and years in that uncomfortable feeling and, maybe started having back problems and all those things, started having to have days off or maybe even take FMLA for back issues. So make sure that you're just giving people the tools that they need, if it's proper lighting, if it's, like I said, ergonomic assessments, if it's squeezy balls for just carpal tunnel people who may have to write or type a lot. Make sure that we're just, being aware of what our employee needs and we're investing in them. The last point that I have that are ways to help encourage better retention is understanding why people are leaving. So if your organization, if your human resources department is doing exit interviews, or if you are conducting any type of conversations as people turn in their resignations to leave, analyze, your attrition rate and to try to understand why people are leaving so you can improve on those things where you can. You may not be able to improve on everything. Some people may just have true life situations. They are in the military, or, they truly are going back to school to better themselves. But if a lot of people are leaving because of the schedule, because of pay, because of the environment, because of the culture, try to understand those things so you can make changes. We want to act quickly, but know that some of those things might be an ongoing process. But just make sure that you are aware of what your environment is at all times, and so you can make those changes. Sometimes people may be leaving because there was very little recognition. So, there is a saying that says those that drink water must remember who dug the well. Are you having a way to recognize your employees, to show appreciation for hard work where hard work is due? You may not be able to show value with bonuses, and, with COVID times, pizza parties and potlucks may not be always the option. But there are small ways, and you can easily look up online or Google different ways to show appreciation virtually and celebrate the small wins in your areas. We've done a lot of conversation about the benefits of having better staff retention. So, have any of you guys, Tywauna or Lona, worked on projects in your department to improve your staff retention, and what were some of the benefits that you guys saw from that?
Yes, we have. And you, Stephanie, you always have such great tips and takeaways for our listeners. So thank you so much. I mean, you give a plethora of ways. So listeners, if you did not pick up on all of those ways that Stephanie presented, make sure you go back and listen to this podcast, because Stephanie always drops plenty of gems that I write down. So one of the things that my particular organization did to retain staff, and really they started with management, and one of the biggest complaints, especially that came up in our employee engagement surveys from our managers, was that, we don't feel prepared, and we, are having struggle or having, a little bit of turmoil trying to lead. And that came out within their staff as well. And so the organization took a step back and said, what can we do to really develop our managers so that they can be successful in leading the organizations and leading the teams across our multiple sites? And the organization invested in a program, a leadership program, online electronic management system, prior learning, that they invested for all of the members of the management team to be able to have access to for a year. And inside of that program, there are on-demand courses. There are live or virtual live courses that managers can take, from leadership to Microsoft Office programs to project management. And what we have seen is that the managers are very intentional about making time to participate in those programs that are offered through Fred Pryor, and they're starting to really feel empowered. I heard one manager say she took the Excel classes. She said, well, I'm already putting this into practice. I'm learning pivot tables, and I'm learning how to make our data look beautiful by using Excel. And that was because the organization invested in making sure there was access for all of the members of the management team. And in turn, the team or the staff are starting to see those benefits because their managers are now more in tune. There were certain classes that the organization recommended, like conflict management, project management, how to be a new supervisor, or developing your management skills, that everyone was required or is required to take before the year's over. But just hearing from team members, I could definitely tell that it's making a difference. So when organizations start to invest in their employees and the personal development, you can really see that now those managers are excited again, and they are wanting to stay in their roles, because we did have a time where people were in these leadership roles and just so overwhelmed that they were looking to go back to the bench. They were looking to move into roles that they felt were less stressful because they weren't as prepared. So you start to see it from the top down in regards to the benefits and the staff retention. Just, that one example. There are several that I could talk about, but that was one that I really felt like the organization listened and started pouring into the team, and now the team is starting to reap the benefits of that.
I mean, obviously, like we said before, when you have continuous staff retention, and when you're focusing on that, just like you're focusing on your budget, just like you're focusing on your turnaround time, and you're capping your, other regulatory inspections, when we're focusing on how to actively retain our staff and getting out of that cycle of continuous recruitment, training, orientation, that is so honestly just taxing on your staff. If you are a tech working the bench right now, or if you're in management, you can remember working the bench, it slows the process down. Even though we love, our new technologists, and we appreciate our new employees, and we want new employees on our team, it is taxing on the more experienced technologists to continuously be in a process of training. And that could be an area of dissatisfaction too, to have experienced technologists that are continuously having to train. That can honestly be stressful to a department, especially if you're working in a department that is already innate to stress, like the blood bank. The blood bank having massive transfusions, or just really working in an already stressful environment, to continuously be in a mode of training can tax out your employees. And so there are a lot of benefits to just making sure that we retain our staff. And if you think about it, not just in the laboratory, but think about it if you go to a restaurant and every waiter in the restaurant is brand new. How is your service going to be? How prolonged is your wait for your check when you're done with your meal? How prolonged is it going to be for you to get your meal if everybody in the kitchen is brand new? And so the service to the customer, whether you work at a restaurant or a laboratory, if you work at the bank, the service to your customers is so much better when you've got employees working that know the routine, that know the process, that know the organization, have been there a while. And so you're as a customer, you just have a better experience. There are less errors, and we're able to shift, like I said, from focusing on continuous recruitment and training and orientation to shift towards, process improvement and making things better and making things leaner and making things more efficient. Any closing points, ladies, before we could talk about this all day, I'm sure, because this is something, like I said, we've had several other episodes on how to retain, medical technologists and the workforce shortages and ways to think outside of the box to keep people engaged. And so, like I said, we could have so many parts and different series to this conversation. But any closing thoughts?
Yeah, so, when we talk about, when we talk about benefits and even how we can actually make this happen, I think about the patient safety aspect of it. And I know it's so important for others to make sure that their other team members are actually doing quality work. And so for us, we did a patient safety survey or cultural safety survey. And when we identified a lot of patient safety issues, what we did a debriefing. So we actually allowed the staff to come up with solutions to help to create that environment where they felt safe, where they felt that they were actually doing quality work. So it's so important to get staff involved when it comes to these solutions so that they themselves will help you to know what is it that will help them to feel safe and want to stay. So that's a great benefit when it comes to staff morale. So when you improve those, when you take some of those methods that Stephanie gave us about ways to encourage these better staff retention, that also brings a better morale for your staff. It reduces a lot of costs when it comes to recruitment and other things. So it's not only just saving money, but it's creating that environment where everyone is happy and you want to continue to work. So I think it's just so much benefits that we get out of that it's just the best thing to do.
Well, as always, to all of our listeners, thank you for tuning in and checking out this very interesting episode of eLABorate Topics podcast with your host, myself, Stephanie Whitehead, Lona Small, and Tywauna Wilson. Please leave us a comment. We'd like to hear more from you all on this topic, things that you've done to increase the engagement and help retain your staff. Or if you're struggling, let us know what aspects you're struggling with, and maybe we can help give you some specialized tips that might work for your teams in your laboratory. If you like what you heard today and you want to hear more of our shows, be sure to subscribe to our podcast at directimpactbroadcasting.com or on your favorite podcast platform. Remember to send us an email at elaboratetopics@directimpactbroadcasting.com to learn more about this topic, to learn more about us as co-hosts, or just to be a guest on the show. Please tune in next week to hear another amazing episode of the eLABorate Topics podcast, and until then, have a great day.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of eLABorate Topics, where your hosts discussed relevant strategies for laboratory professionals. Please subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and listen to us on directimpactbroadcasting.com. Stay tuned for another episode with information you can use to excel in your